distinguished guests on the dais. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the first Icedc Symposium on the strategic importance of career development in schools. But first up, I'd like to invite Mr. Craig Johnson, the Superintendent of the American School, to officially welcome the gathering.
There is actually one variable in the DNA of Indian education that most countries in the world would give up most of what they have to get that. There's something we have in this country, in the DNA of our educational paradigm, that most countries would trade anything to get. Education in India is revered. When you walk into a school, kids have a holy religious reverence for learning and for education. The deep, profound reverence that most countries would trade anything to get. The verbs that are not in the mission of the Indian Education Career Council development are to memorize. This is not one of your verbs. To recite. This is not one of your verbs. To study. This is not one of your verbs. To test. This is not one of your verbs. To inform is not one of your verbs. The 5 verbs in your organization's mission statement are to explore, to understand, to decide, to plan, and to execute. And these 5 verbs, explore, understand, decide, plan, and execute, in real-life scenarios to create a youth in India and the world that is self-directed and self-informed.
It gives me great pleasure now to introduce to you our chief guests, Mr. Nadir Godrej and Dr. Atik Godrej.
Now India is on the rise. The economy is of a decent size, and growth will now accelerate, and soon we will celebrate GDP growth that's somewhat better than China, that amazing go-getter. We are constantly being told that the developing world is growing old, and China too will now start aging, just as India is luckily staging its greatest growth in the working force, and the dependency ratio, of course, will fall and stay low for years to come. And that is the argument in sum for our demographic dividend. It's not for us to merrily spend, but neither should it just be spurned. It's not for granted, but must be earned. It should be clearly understood that untrained hordes do us no good. Alas, inadequate education is the bane of our nation. School leavers are few and far between. In tertiary education, fewer are seen, and vocational education is very thin. So how could we possibly win? Could the National Skill Development Corporation provide salvation for our nation? Economic opportunity can beckon, and yet we would have to reckon with a world in rapid change and outcomes in an uncertain range. Technology is advancing fast. We've little guidance from the past, and learnings are soon obsolete. We'll have to master the feat of continuous lifetime learning if we want to keep on earning. The workforce of the future, I fear, will see many changes in career, and skills we'll constantly hone. If the first job's a mere stepping stone, there is perhaps no decision that would require as much precision as the choice of a good career. So how should we decide to steer the youth who had to make this choice? Now in the past they had no voice. The parents often chose by fashion, ignoring aptitude or passion, and few were thought respectable or financially acceptable. But now the choice is very wide, and perfect matching can be tried. Job needs can fit with aptitude, and satisfaction with attitude. And early intervention's best, with both an interview and test that gives time for preparation and options for reconsideration. In case of error, we've always got a chance at a second shot. And if we are really to succeed, a professional approach is what we need. An international association can help develop our nation. Best practices can be adopted, new members can then be co-opted, good information can be provided, all young adults can be guided with a professional approach by a good career guidance coach who would know how well to steer each one to a matched career. And thanks to Icedc, we will achieve our destiny of economic and social growth. I hope that we'll succeed in both, thanks to a brilliant working force that proves to be the perfect source for all the needs of the economy and yet escapes all drudgery, since none are just poorly patched and all have been ideally matched. And I just hope I live to see an India striving happily with all well matched and all well skilled, all working well and all fulfilled. Thank you.
I feel there were 5 key factors which are important in guiding a student towards a meaningful career choice. First is education, the love of learning and a curiosity about life. Unfortunately, that gets quashed sometimes very early in our traditional educational system. Although it's a very competitive educational structure, I still find emphasizing learning over grades and marks critical. Instead of, why did you get only 80%? It's probably a better question to ask, how could you have prepared better to have done better? Facts can be tested on exams, but true learning from experiences is difficult to test. Today, learning is about solving problems, applying knowledge in practical solutions, and working collaboratively in teams to be successful. The next important factor is integrity. We do see a degradation of values and ethics in all professions today, including medicine, business, politics, and most recently we've read about even spiritual leaders. This leads to a mistrust and suspicion of these professions and for those who are truly and genuinely working to improve the quality of life in society. Integrity is a core value to be reinforced at school and at home if success is to be sustainable over a long period, both for the individual as well as for society. The third important aspect, I think, is aptitude. There are numerous aptitudes: creative, physical, intellectual, mathematical, literary, musical. It's easy to impose the attributes we want on our children onto them, or the ones we wish we had, which we hope they have. However, it's more important to identify and cultivate their own unique talents and skills. This encourages excellence, helps with good self-esteem and self-acceptance. The fourth most important factor, I would say, is passion. One may not always be passionate about what one is good at. Passion is how and what you want to express to the world. It's something that gives you so much joy that you're happier that today is Monday than it's a Friday. The fifth and most important factor that I hope young people will think about in choosing a career is service. The most cherished experiences are those where you leave your personal ambitions behind and focus on people or causes that need you the most. We can all encourage students to consider these factors when choosing a career path. This will help students make the right choices for themselves and as they begin their journey towards a life of meaning and purpose. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce to you Mr. Mark Pierce, Australian Consul General in Mumbai. Mr. Pierce is a Senior Career Officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
I was struck before my Prime Minister came here 2 months ago by a talk down at the University of Mumbai. The Vice-Chancellor asked me to come down, talk to a group of 20 young people, students, who were going to meet the Prime Minister and have morning tea with him. I was struck by 2 things. First, the obvious point, how terrific they were, how smart and alert and charming, funny and clever they were. And second, by the fact that the Vice-Chancellor said to them, not all of you does mathematics, but could all of you have a think about 20 students meeting the Australian Prime Minister out of a cohort in higher education in India on any given day of 23 million students.
Because by RISE Foundation, I began with the mission of changing underserved societies into knowledge societies. And when I did my survey, I figured out that knowledge per se was not a demand. Nobody wanted knowledge per se because they said, we don't get 2 square meals with this knowledge. So this is where most of Indian people in the villages.
Good morning. I suspect most of us in the room are members of professional associations, so this is not going to be too new, but because I was involved in developing a couple of professional associations in Australia, I was asked to just spend 10 minutes reflecting on that growth and development and where that might lead for Icedc.
Icedc was initiated in April 2014 with the support of Australia-India Council to create awareness, build and promote structured career education and develop ecosystem in India, starting from schools. It aims to consult and collaborate with government, educators, industries and community to develop and deliver initiatives that ensure seamless, inclusive and integral human development vis-a-vis life, learning and work.
It's hard as being parents of children to advise them on their career. I think it's probably equally hard if you're a teacher of a child to advise them on what they should do when they grow up. Each of us have a good understanding of the child, each of us know some parts of the child really well, but none of us really have a holistic understanding of the child. There's also an asymmetry of information I find. So he needs or she needs to have access to the career choices available to somebody with his strengths and his passion, and schools should be able to provide him with a body of knowledge to understand those needs and help educate and make sure he has the skills and knowledge required to get to that career.
Good afternoon everyone, my name is Jeevan Nikuna, also a teacher, psychologist and a counsellor, and now Director of People Learning and Capability Development at Global Education Solutions. It's an opportunity of a lifetime. I love working with adolescents. I've been working with adolescents for nearly 20 years of my life now. And this was an opportunity that I just couldn't pass by because working with 5,000 kids was amazing at the school that I worked at. But then the opportunity to work with 500 million kids is a dream of a lifetime.
We're much better connected today. I mean, something happens all the way the other side of the world and we know about it in like seconds. And I have to be mindful of all these things when I design the sort of learning process. If this new age is a conceptual age, it calls for a lot more right brain sort of development experiences. Our kids will need to embrace creativity, innovation, and connection. I also believe we need to encourage our kids to live, learn, and contribute, and also to be mindful consumers. I remember when I was in high school, there was this big article about some lady who had 200 pairs of shoes, and it was like an outcry because she was the wife of some leader, and you know, the hue and cry about it. I know most teenagers today have 200 pairs of shoes in their wardrobe. So I think also getting kids to become mindful consumers, also mindful that out of the 7 billion people on the planet, only 1 billion live the lives that we live. The rest are a little, and we live incredible lives. We live better than kings and queens ever used to. But the rest of the 6 billion sort of live a little better or worse than peasants used to in the Middle Ages.
We both have done research in career education, and it's coming through pretty clearly now that the more comprehensive career education programs you have in school, the better the school results are, the students' results are, and the better the students' outcomes are. And I can talk about that till the cows come home. But there's two major impacts at the moment, and we haven't had that research until the recent years. And it's showing where there's comprehensive programs, students' results improve, and the results improve and the outcomes improve. And I think it's the issue that you raised about when you have a careers program, students can connect. And when they can connect to the world and have some sort of connection and direction, then a whole range of things happen, behaviourally and so on.
What we have done at Icedc is to learn from our mentors, people who have already walked the talk, who have established programs. Our friends at CDAA, at CEAB, we've kind of worked with Career New Zealand and the others across the world. They have a lot of experience, and I think, share on a personal note, one of my first exposures to career education was when I was doing my master's in the United States. And I happened to work with David Bluestein, whom we'll hear later in the evening. And it's a great pleasure to have him back, and we were kind of to test Skype, actually had a nice conversation with him this morning.
Very quickly about who we are. We're an Australian-based company. We provide work in the public policy, research, evaluation, and those three areas. We also do a lot of work around the practical side of things, so these labour market information products. We've written papers on parental engagement. We've developed a workplace culture guide that's used nationally in Australia for new migrants working in Australia.
If we look at Indian situations, I would say we are really at a point of inflection as far as career services, profession is concerned. That the way we are addressing the needs of the students in career counselling and career education. I'm sure that much of work has been done, or is being done very well by. We have many counsellors. And university has very good research stream in the field of self-knowledge, that is psychometric testing and other things. But if you look at occupational knowledge domain, the way we have seen today since morning, the work that has been done, I'm sure that we are standing at a point where we have to really take a hard look and see what we can do here for Indian students and how we can really contribute to their career education. So today I will just cover a few points about what exactly is a need for what I am proposing here, that is integration of economic business and occupational information. And I am also using a word called dynamic. So what's dynamic? I mean, why not static? So dynamic, why? So I'll actually, in the beginning, very quickly point upon that, and I will try to build upon a case. Obviously, I have paucity of time, like 15 minutes, I'm probably already 3 minutes lower. Try to build a case that what a future-focused model has to be, should be, what is, I'm sure that for us here in this audience, is very essential for us to know, because when we go for asking for a service as a parent, maybe to a career counselor, or as a school to career service provider, and we have to know exactly what are they doing in what kind of information they have, and what is the knowledge base that they have. It's very important for us to know, because we have to evaluate the model that they're proposing in a very rational way. So it's very important for us to know. And finally, in the final few minutes, I will touch upon the framework that Icedc has been working on for quite some time, and what we are today, and how we are going to build upon the model in the future.
25% of them roughly can expect to have a mental health disorder at some stage in their lives. So 25% of those people there may have an issue. And 45% of them will have some stage, 25% of them already, and 45% altogether. And Australia, unfortunately, has that number of suicides per year. So 11 of those people will probably commit suicide in that year, and 110 of those people will be dead within 10 years because they'll commit suicide. Right? So, because of that, that's what Marty Seligman was about, trying to build resilience in people, trying to give them the strength to say, how can I cope with life's ups and downs? And that's what positive psychology is all about, saying there are skills that can be taught which will enable you to manage your life better. So when those problems come, you can cope, and the kind of depression and all those issues are not going to take over.
The most important or the critical questions for them, and that's what we will now little talk about is, okay, one sec please, just let me get used to this. The lower one. Okay, thank you. So obviously, when we are talking about students and schools, there are three critical questions that would always come around to us. But then what is it that our students are learning? How well do the teachers teach? And what is the quality of our schools? And how critical is it that we keep on making changes? It is always the leadership team who has to ensure that they are taking the initiative to meet up with the new challenges.
The question I ask is, where are those millions of young graduates in this country going? Why are they not employable? Now, if you look at it from the point of view of employers, I work very closely with Infosys. They run a training institute in Mysore, right? And this is exactly what they do. After 18 years of engineering, after 18 years of education, you've got a young engineer who gets picked up by Infosys. They pay them a salary anything from 25 to 50,000 rupees a month and put them in their Mysore campus. And for 9 months, they teach them things. You know what they teach them? Team building, communication, interpersonal skills. You know, the question that you and I need to ask is, what on earth did we teach them for 18 goddamn years?